sirens are starting to come. We're starting to hear fire engines come closer to us, and we assume more EMS units. We know a lot of the suppression forces that have been here to put the fire out that lasted for more than 24 hours have left. So I'm sure they're going to have to call in I'm sure they have a certain amount of fire engines here that will help them put out a fire, but I'm sure they're going to need a lot more because this thing is spreading very rapidly.
Well, the next step then is to is to get a report from the firefighters as to what's going on in there.
Right. Right now, we're unable to monitor the radios to hear what is going on in there. We do know there are two teams that work at a time. One is Fairfax County, I believe, and Tennessee work together in Montgomery and Virginia Beach. There are 4 teams, 2 teams working at a time, 2 work night, 2 work during the day. I'm not exactly sure which teams are working. As you can see, the first water being put on the fire here from outside the building. I can't tell if that's a manned hose line or what they call a monitor nozzle, but they're trying to put the fire out. Again, unclear exactly what happened other than smoke. We could see a puff of smoke in the upper right-hand corner as if there might have been a collapse, and then fire rapidly spreading down to the bottom left. So they're getting water on it. We can hear sirens coming from a distance indicating they've called for assistance here to assist the urban search and rescue teams and the other firefighters that are on the scene. No warning of this other than the air horn that we heard, and certainly right now we don't have any information from the people who are down there.
All right, the latest information we have is that there were 190 fatalities in the collision of that aircraft with the building we're looking at right now.
That's correct. There were 126, I believe, on the ground in the Pentagon, 64 on the plane. The area there, that chasm that we have been seeing since Tuesday morning after it collapsed about 39 minutes after the impact of Flight 77, that area has been called the impact area by the search and rescue teams, and it's the area of really concern that they've been trying to look for a lot of evidence in the black boxes. This is all the part that we're seeing here is the E ring of the Pentagon. As you get further in, there is wreckage that's in the D ring and the C ring. But the first water put on about 10 minutes after the incident or whatever happened. Again, we know fire erupted. We don't know what kind of collapse, if there was one there. We only know that they were concentrating on that area tonight. We heard from Captain Scott McKay of Arlington County that they were going to be working in that area this evening.
Dave, as soon as you hear something more, let us know. We'll get you on the air.
Sure.
Dave Statter reporting from the Pentagon. Gordon Peterson, back now to Dan Rather and CBS News coverage.
Representatives from all of those agencies will be positioned at airports around the clock to enhance the security profile.
Now, at what point are we going to see marshals armed on aircraft, flying actually on the planes?
Well, that certainly will be a decision for the FAA and the airline industry to come to grips with. I'm not certain whether a decision has been made on that at this time.
I'm going to pause, and this interview will continue, but some of the flames have been rekindled at the Pentagon. I'm going to show you a picture there tonight. This is a live picture where firemen have swung back into action trying to put out some of the fires that flamed up again during this early evening. Among other reasons, this is important. The search for bodies is going on there, and also the data flight recorder from the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. They heard sounds from it this afternoon. They were hoping to recover it, still are at some point. Now, Mr. Gambitessa, thanks. We'll continue on. These attacks were carried out with knives on these planes. I don't understand how marshals can be expected to find out that people have knives and stop them when they have knives.
Well, the additional security procedures that we're involved in won't be the actual screening process. That will still be continue to be handled by FAA and their employees and their contract employees.
Now, here's a core question. Is this just symbolic, the business of bringing more marshals into more airports and possibly putting them on planes? Or is there some realistic expectation that this is going to reduce the ability of murderers to do what they did this week?
Well, I think any increase in a physical security presence is certainly a deterrence to any criminal activity, and we believe that the increased presence at the airports will dissuade. It also puts more people out there to look for individuals who may pose a threat.
Thank you very much, the Deputy Director of the U.S. Marshal Service, Donald Gambitessa. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Such a big part of this story concerns the heroic firefighters, those who ran straight toward the scene of a hellish tragedy. Aaron Moriarty has this account.
I can see the light. Come to the light. Hello? Anybody in the street? Hello? those wonderful young firemen, Christian and his colleagues, I know that their first thought was not for themselves, but to save these people, to help these people, to try to save lives.
It was Christian Regenhardt's first big assignment.
He just graduated a few weeks ago. We just had the graduation ceremony. We're all so proud of him.
Stationed at this firehouse in Brooklyn, Christian was one of the first sent to the scene of the World Trade Center.
Would that be like your brother, to go right to ground zero and try to help?
Yeah, he'd want to be on the front lines.
Sally Regenhardt is his mother, Christine, his older sister.
You know, life was not a spectator sport for Christian.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about your brother?
Right now, it's where is he and when will I see him again?
Christian is missing. Shortly after the second tower collapsed, he and 4 of his comrades disappeared in the dust and the smoke.
We're hoping that maybe he's in a hospital, but maybe he's not able to speak. Other people who were termed missing did show up in other hospitals, so that's what we're hoping for.
Just 28 years old, Christian is an athlete and a former Marine. A man, says his mother, who isn't afraid of anything.
He survived typhoons. He survived very dangerous areas.
It was a time when he got caught in a storm and he had to spend 2 nights on the side of a mountain.
Yes.
That's why you haven't given up any hope.
Exactly.
Right?
But time is dragging on.
The longer we go by without having any word from him, experts, give estimations of how long someone could survive under the rubble, under those conditions. That's the darkest time.
Reports that several firefighters have been found alive in the rubble gives the Regenhardts hope.
We made several attempts to find out who they were. We're still hoping that someone who is connected with Bellevue Hospital can call us and tell us, one way or the other.
Just moments later.
Hello? Yes.
That call comes.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless. Bye. They checked the list at Bellevue and Cabrini Hospital. He's not on their lists.
Christian remains on the missing list.
The numbers kept going up about how many firefighters were missing.
Yes.
It was so hard.
We were shocked.
It started with 200, and then it went to 250 and 265, and then 300.
Then over 300.
It just, the despair that you feel.
Yes.
It is a despair felt all over this city. To give you some idea of the scope of this disaster, consider this. More than 300 New York firefighters have died in the line of duty in this city since the department was established in 1865. On Tuesday, in one horrific event, nearly that same number may have been lost.
He was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. There was no other place for him to be.
There's no more waiting for the Theans. Their father, William, was one of the first firemen killed.
Did you know he'd be there?
Yeah, I knew he was there. My one focus when I got there, as chaotic as everything was and everything that had to be done at that point, all I kept asking the guys who were with me is, help me find the command post. So I knew he was gonna, I knew that's where he'd
This
be.
is Dave Statter at the Pentagon, where we've had a development this evening. Around 9:50, 9:51 this evening, air horns sounded at the Pentagon, which meant an evacuation again today at the Pentagon, this evening here at the Pentagon, while urban search and rescue teams are working. Shortly thereafter, smoke was seen from the upper right-hand corner of this break in the Pentagon, and then flames rapidly spread down to the lower left of that break. Right now, the fire has been darkened down. Water was poured on it a short time ago, and now the fire seems to be, for the most part, out. But there was a great deal of fire for about 15 minutes here at the Pentagon. Extra equipment has been called in. We have no official word what happened there, whether it was a collapse or a sudden fire. We do know there was fire involved, and we do know that the evacuation horns were sounded for quite a while to get any personnel out of the building. We're waiting for word from the urban search and rescue teams exactly what happened. Obviously, something went wrong here. We do know that the urban search and rescue team said they would be working in that area where the break is in the Pentagon. Of course, we have a lot of families out there who are concerned about the firefighters from Montgomery County and Fairfax who are probably watching this broadcast. We will try to get you information as soon as possible exactly what happened here. Obviously, something went wrong. We do not know for a fact that anybody has been injured in this, but we do know that the urban search and rescue teams have been working in the building, and then very suddenly this evening something went wrong and fire erupted. The fire now has been darkened down, and that's basically the situation at the Pentagon.
Jersey maybe, or because guys were taken all over the place, wherever they could get them out.
I'm not giving up hope.
He's not a person who ever gave up on anything, and we're not going to give up on him.
I miss him so much.
The last time I talked to the Reagan-Hards, there was still no news, but they still have hope. And Dan, as we've seen for the past 2 days, there are thousands of people like this hoping for some word. What complicates the whole thing is that there are 21 hospitals, at least 21 hospitals, where survivors were taken, and you just can't get through. I got some idea of what the Reagan-Hards have been going through when earlier this evening I decided to call around looking for Christian. And I either ran into overloaded phone lines or I'd get through and then I'd be put on hold. And after all of these calls, I never did talk to a human being. To give you an update, there are still somewhere between 300 and 350 firefighters still missing. And I don't want us to forget the police officers. There are at least 40 New York police officers missing tonight.
Aaron Moriarty. And the estimated numbers of missing in and around the Trade Center alone exceeds 4,700. Put that together with the known dead and the expected dead from the Pentagon and the plane crash that went in there. And the number of dead may eventually exceed 5,000 or be somewhere around that mark. For context, at the time of Pearl Harbor, some 2,400 some odd were killed in the Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. Among the headlines at this hour, Vice President Dick Cheney has gone to Camp David, Maryland, just to give some separation in the workplace environment for him and President Bush. The military has requested calling up 30 to 50,000 reserves. The stock markets will not be open tomorrow. They say they will open on Monday. The Justice Department says it not only has the names, but it has the pictures of the 18 people who carried out the suicide attacks in the airplanes. We expect to see those pictures and have the names somewhere in the next 6 to 12 hours. One of the stories, the story of this terrible unfolding tragedy, the missing. And for that, let's turn to Ed Bradley. Ed?
Dan, over the last 3 days, the streets of Manhattan have been dotted with people like we've just seen in Aaron's report, people waiting for news, thousands of them trying to keep hope alive.
Last thing he said was he loved me and they'll call me.
We think that maybe he may have gone back to help somebody because that's just the kind of person that he was.
All night, all day, they've stood vigil, searched, and hoped.
Just, keep strong and keep sending out emails. We'll find him.
They are the families and friends of the disappeared.
And he's a lot of fun to be around. He absolutely loves Christmas.
Those lost, injured, may be killed when the Twin Towers crumble.
We've been trying his cell phone, and it rings 4 times, and then we get his answering machine. So I just left a message saying I love you, and we want to find you. We're going to go down to Bellevue because that's pretty much where the big list is.
Since Tuesday, too many have made this miserable trek.
I'm sorry.
From hospital to hospital.
You let them know you went to new school, and they have something set up there with a list of names for family members.
They have an up-to-date list?
They're updating it as we speak. All right.
In search of any information.
We have a glimmer of hope. Glimmer.
We just want to find him.
Any sign of their missing loved ones.
I don't even know if there's a point of this, showing this, but, we love him and we have all these pictures.
Each inevitably carries a favorite photo.
He's a loving person, the best big brother I could ever have. He was able to answer his cell phone only to say, I'm trapped on the 94th floor and I can't breathe. And then the cell phone went dead. And we haven't heard anything else.
Each inevitably has a story to tell.
You know, this guy was a partier. You know, actually, I choose to believe he's still a partier. They just need to find him.
And each story inevitably is heartbreaking.
She's my best friend. Please give us. We are 9 sisters and brother. And Rosa, whatever you are, please, Rosa, come to us. And if you are in there, please survive for us. Come to us, come back, please.
I'm looking for my sister-in-law. Her name is Clarence Schwartz, and she was on the 100th floor of Tower 2. And here is her picture.
Take a good look. Both of them. Brother's 27. He's gonna get married next summer in July. His wife's 4 months pregnant. It's messed up, ain't it?
He's a good daddy. He's a good husband. He's a good brother-in-law. He's a good person.
Dawn Chiarenza carries a list of 22 hospitals.
We already gone to St. Vincent's and checked over there.
She says she'll visit every one.
We're looking for my brother-in-law. He called my sister. He was stuck in the stairwell. He called her to tell her that he loved her and to give the kids some love and that everything would be okay. We're at Lenox Hill and we're gonna try and see what we can find out here.
Visiting?
According to them, no, they don't have anything. The next stop is they gave us some possibilities. They have some unknown males at St. Luke's Roosevelt. Is this your new
That's our newest list. Everybody has a name.
They say they don't have any unknowns, and we just got off the phone with Cornell, and they say they don't have any unknowns. Hey, we got word that they brought some people over to Jersey City Hospital. So, no, get call or go or whatever. We are running into dead ends here, and we're just going to keep going.
So far, sadly, no sign of Dawn's brother-in-law.
We're doing it on our own, and it's hard for us to get to each hospital, so we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll hit all the hospitals that we possibly can again.
It is a sentiment shared tonight by so many of these friends and families.
He's my cousin. He was on the 84th floor of 2 World Trade. We're doing everything we can. We're not going to say that he's not around until it's confirmed.
Not near ready to give up looking.
Just gotta hope, right? I mean, there's not much else to do.
Unwilling, unable to give up hope.
To see all these pictures of all the people that are missing and to see all the families walking through the streets looking for people, it's just unbelievable, and how the city's come together. It's truly remarkable.
Dan, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. 2,400 people were killed there. You add those numbers with those lost in the Titanic, 1,500. The worst plane crash in aviation history, some 582 people were killed. You still don't match the potential numbers in this tragedy. At the moment, the number of dead and missing somewhere around 5,000 people.
Ed, thanks. Now Harold Dow, who has some of the remarkable accounts of those who know they've cheated death.
People come from all over the world just to go see those towers.
It showed New York as a superpower, super city.
Just 2 days ago, 42-year-old Phil Bachman and 27-year-old Anthony Christopherson worked together for Bank of America, high above Manhattan in World Trade Center Tower 1.
In July, we moved up to the 81st floor, where helicopters would actually ride underneath us.
They both came to work early this past Tuesday, where it was business as usual.
It's early this Tuesday morning, the 11th of September, 2001.
But not for long.
8:50 or so, I heard a boom.
Yeah, there's Tom Kaminsky, Chopper 880.
All right, Pat, we are just currently getting a look at the World Trade Center.
So when it hit, first thing I did was, I got knocked down.
Anthony jumped back up and looked out the window. What he saw horrified him.
Some people, debris falling, a lot of ashes, a lot of fire, a lot of smoke. that was so scary. That's when I started, panicking.
Everyone on the 81st floor ran for the emergency exit and started down the stairs. At first, they made steady progress.
We're on the 50th floor, the 40th floor, the 30th floor. But as we're going down, we're seeing firemen resting. The sweat is dripping off their face, and they're carrying oxygen tanks. And you start to think, are you going to make it?
Just a few blocks north, Phil's girlfriend, Helen Orloff, was at work, watching TV, and wondering the same thing.
I became hysterical, and I tried to call him, and I couldn't get him, obviously. He kept saying that my heart is in that building.
Phil finally made it to the lobby of Tower 1. He was just about free of the building. But then...
What's the other jet doing? Holy f***.
Dad! Oh my God!
That's when the second plane hit Tower 2.
All over.
Lights went out, 3 cops jumped on top of me. One guy gave me his helmet, and I covered my face, and they just said, remain calm.
They were in darkness, the air thick with smoke and dust.
And the cop said, let's get out of here, and he started feeling his way around. Once we saw that bit of light, I don't think anything would have stopped us. I walked out, it was literally a war zone. There was ashes all over. Right. There was small balls of fire. There was concrete, glass as far as you can see.
Everywhere.
As far as you can see.
Anthony came out a few seconds later. Again, everyone seemed to be safe. But then...
Oh no! Oh no!
Maybe 15 seconds after I walked out, that's when the second tower came down.
And I just turned around.
That's exactly what I did.
And you could actually see it come down. They kept telling us, go north, keep going north, don't look back.
That's when I ran, and if I hold my hand in front of my face, I would not be able to see it.
Come to the light!
It was so horrible.
I got 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and the first building went down.
News photographer Don Hallisey was covering the disaster for the New York Post.
Of course, everybody's running away from it, and I'm a press photographer. I'm running to it.
Hallisey ran towards the wreckage of Tower 2 and started shooting photos, getting closer and closer to ground zero.
And then we heard like this growing, rumbling, and it sounded like an avalanche.
It was Tower 1 coming down.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building that was...
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground. And I'd say like I was about from here to the end of the partition here.
Yeah.
And I'm screaming, anybody out there? Anybody alive? And my voice was the only voice out there.
How did you get out of this?
Well, I started walking around like in very short steps because I didn't want to trip over anything. And as I said, after about 20 minutes or so, it started to settle and the sun came out. It was like the weirdest thing.
By this time, Phil and Anthony had finally run far enough to be out of harm's way.
And then I finally collapsed, and the EMS was so good. You know, they treated everybody. They just said, sit here. They gave me oxygen.
Kept getting phone calls at my desk, and I got this message, and you keep deleting, because and all you kept praying is, come on, God, let me hear his voice. Come on. And then I got, Helen, it's me. The building fell down on me. I'm sorry, don't be mad. I love you. I'm on my way home.
I couldn't see anything.
And my whole department started to cheer.
Look at it now. It's just like, it's like nothing was there. Think how many bodies are still there.
But as for Don Hallisey, he's left with anger.
I've never had this kind of hate before. Never. Those son of a bitches. I was saying there better be a hole in the ground somewhere. Because if Bush doesn't do something about this, I mean, this is not terrorism. This is an act of war.
A lot of the survivors we talked to are angry. Doug Brown, an executive who worked on the 70th floor of the World Trade Center for Morgan Stanley, got straight to the point when he said, quote, "On Tuesday, somebody tried to kill me. With that kind of anger, expectations are high that the government will do something." Dan?
Harold Dow, live here in New York City. Events of the last few days have already changed so much for so many. Life as we know it may never be quite the same. With that in mind, here's Bill Lagatuda.
As Americans went about their business today, took their kids back to school, resumed their routines, there was an almost universal refrain. First, defiance. We will not let terrorists dictate how we lead our lives.
If that happens, they've won. I'm not going to leave New York. I'm not going to run.
Then, reality. Some things will have to change.
Do you think that things are different from this moment on?
I definitely think things are different from this moment on.
Definitely be more aware of my surroundings and individuals that are around me.
December 7th, 1941.
This is not the first time horrible events have changed our society. Pearl Harbor showed us how suddenly an enemy can strike. In the early 60s, we learned our leaders could be taken. In the 70s and 80s, that our jetliners could be hijacked. In the 90s, that terror can come from within. Then, this week.
This is Dave Statter at the Pentagon. We now have an update on what happened here this evening. A brief setback for the search and rescue teams who have been pulled out of the building here because a fire suddenly erupted just before 10 o'clock this evening. We'll show you the pictures. As the fire spread, it looked like from the upper right-hand corner of the break in the building to the lower left-hand corner. The fire suddenly erupted, no collapse, and a bit of a setback, but everybody is safe. That's the important thing. No one is injured, no one having difficulty at the moment. All the search and rescue teams are safe. In fact, with me right now, we'll bring him over here, Scott Graham, who's with Montgomery Search and Rescue. Scott, step down here if you would as we watch the tape from earlier. Scott, exactly what happened there?
Well, what we've evaluated to this point, Dave, is that there was a reignition from an unknown source of origin. They're looking into that right now. We did have rescuers working at the time. However, nobody was injured. All the rescuers were evacuated out of the building quickly, safely, and the fire was knocked down pretty quickly. Fairfax County Fire Rescue brought several pieces of apparatus in to knock the fire. We're going to continue to evaluate the building, take a look. It's a minor setback, but I think that as we evaluate what's going on here, we'll get back into our nighttime operations very soon.
The important thing is that everyone is safe. Fairfax is working in there now with who?
We have Virginia Beach Task Force, Virginia's Task Force number 2, and Fairfax Fire Department's Virginia Task Force 1.
Captain Graham, this is one of the difficulties that you have to deal with in something like this, I guess.
It is, but again, the constant reevaluation process allows us to get our rescuers out safely. We're into a pretty significant shoring and stabilizing operation now that started earlier today with Montgomery County and with Memphis, Tennessee. And they're continuing with this operation through the night. And like I said, it's a minor slowdown, but we'll be continuing as soon as we reevaluate the structure.
Thank you. That's Captain Scott Graham with Montgomery search team here, rescue team, talking about the fire that erupted just before 10 o'clock. As you can see now, most of that fire has been darkened down. There are I understand, some hot pockets of fire underneath that roof slab.
That's correct. We're evaluating that now. They're going to get the engineers up in and fire department officials, and we're going to take a look, just make sure everything's out so we can start again.
I know you've been searching for evidence in there. Any signs of the flight data recorder at this point?
I don't have any information on that, no, sir.
Okay. That's Captain Scott Graham, Montgomery's search and rescue team. Good news is all the rescuers, all the search and rescue teams who are working in there are safe. Fire erupted very quickly just before 10 o'clock and then spread from the upper right hand to the lower left, and most of the fire has now been darkened down, but there's still some pockets in there, and they're going to be working to get that out before they move back in to continue their operation. That's the situation at the Pentagon at the moment.
People may be afraid of being at America's landmarks, like the Empire State Building. She is not.
We still came today, and we wanted to go on the top of Empire State Building, you know, to see the only one what we have left. We have no fear from that.
After any terrorist attack, there is the usual outpouring of emotion, followed by the immediate security crackdown, and then history shows us after weeks, maybe months, we let down our guard. The question many Americans are wondering tonight is, will this time be different? Dan?
Bill Lagattuda, thanks. All major sporting events have been canceled for this weekend as the nation grieves. Joining us now, Jim Nance of CBS Sports. Jim, thanks for coming in and talking about this. A lot of us remember that old movie Black Sunday about the terrorist attack at a Super Bowl. Is that or is it not one of the reasons that the NFL games were canceled this weekend?
I don't think anyone really wanted to be in a stadium with 80,000 people this weekend, including the players. You know, there's a lot of history, I believe, that went into the decision today to cancel the games by the NFL. You go back to 1963, and Pete Rozelle, still regarded by many to be the greatest commissioner of any sport in any league in the history of sport.
Tremendous public relations man.
And he made the decision 2 days, to play 2 days later after JFK was assassinated, and he said later that it was the biggest decision, most regrettable decision of his life. And I think the league thought about it a lot. I know there were a lot of players that, especially the Jets and the Giants here in New York, they had no desire to play this weekend.
I know it's going to strike some people as trivial even talking about sporting events, but we want to note that sports is a very important part of American culture. And football alone, baseball games canceled until at least Monday. But when they came to a vote, yes, publicly the vote's going to be unanimous among the players and among the owners. But there must have been some debate about whether to go ahead, because one argument would be, look, we need to show these dastardly people that we're still on our feet. And that would have been a symbol of sorts to go ahead and play the games.
That's true, but I think that it might be a big stretch to assume that you're really sending a message to the terrorists if you fill up stadiums this weekend and play football. I don't think they really care about American football or maybe even have any knowledge of how important that is to certain people. I don't think they feel like they've won anything because games are canceled this weekend. I think that's a large assumption.
But what about the vote among the players and the owners?
They say it was unanimous, Dan, but really the inside word is it was a slight majority in favor of not playing. In the end, they said, let's just make it a majority. I think those detached from the New York area said, let's play. But, you know, the Jets were scheduled to play at Oakland. They didn't want to get on a plane, albeit a charter, and fly out to California.
What about the Giants, the other local team, most directly affected?
The Giants, from their practice facility across the river, every day this week, practice looking across the river, and that smoldering reminder of all the tragedy in Manhattan and the rubble and the lives that have been lost, and they've looked at it right there from the practice field. No frame of mind at all to play football this weekend. Moreover, you know, the Giants, had they played this weekend, would have been hosting Green Bay. How do you put 80,000 people in Giant Stadium this weekend and then cheer for something as immaterial, insignificant right now as a touchdown? Who cares? It's only sport.
I'll come back to the vote. I understand that you said with the owners it was fairly close. In the end, they made it, 38-0 or whatever, but it was close. What about with the players? Was it close? How was it shaded in the real vote?
I think the players' vote was a lot closer to play than maybe most people would imagine. I mean, it was totally opposed, again, from the New York area teams and the teams on the East Coast. And, you know, the owners, there were some long-time NFL owners, Wellington Mara of the Giants and Art Modell, now with the Ravens, who had the history of having been around the 1963 let's play on decision. And I think they really, you know, raised their opinions and voices and were heard. And in the end, the right decision, I believe, was made. Now, there are going to be a lot of opponents, reporters out there who say, oh, this is totally wrong. They should have played, should have sent a message. How can you go out and play football this weekend when memorial services are going to be held and we're still trying to find people in what was the World Trade Center? It's just, it's crazy to think that you could be sitting in a stadium with 80,000 people. That's a large enough target to begin with. But on top of it be cheering. It's just, I don't think it fits the right mood right now in the nation.
What about other sports? Baseball's canceled. What about golf? Horse racing, car racing?
Virtually everything, almost everything is canceled. The interesting thing, college football, there were some stray conferences that were going to play on Saturday. And when the NFL came down with that decision late this morning, they stepped right in line with the most dominant, important league in American sports, the NFL, and they canceled all Division I Football games are canceled on Saturday. Baseball, interestingly, is out until Monday. That gives them now 6 days without playing. It's the longest stretch that baseball has been suspended since the World War I, 1918, when play was suspended for a 30-day stretch. And when they do resume play on Monday, the Mets' home game series against Pittsburgh has been moved to Pittsburgh.
And NASCAR's canceled its scheduled event for this weekend. Jim Nance, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
When terror struck this week, thousands of Americans were stranded in transit. John Blackstone has the story of how some are now getting where they were going in the first place.
As they waited in Honolulu, a stranded hula group could at least keep other marooned passengers entertained. At airports across the country, countless would-be travelers have the same goal, to be someplace else.
All they want to do is get out of San Francisco. They don't care how they get out of San Francisco.
But as the aviation system creaked back into business today, there was plenty of confusion. An Italian airliner cleared to San Francisco was turned around twice before finally being allowed to land.
They told us that it was an administrative misunderstanding.
Uncertainties in airline schedules are expected to stretch well into next week.
Has it been damaging? It's been incredibly damaging.
Aviation consultant Michael Boyd says for many, air travel may never be the same.
Nothing. What we're going to find is a propensity not to travel, and that's going to really hurt whole sections of our economy.
With some 40,000 flights a day canceled, the shutdown could cost the airline industry internationally as much as $10 billion. And the losses don't stop with the airlines.
Between mail not getting through, between passengers not getting through, between important documents not getting through, air cargo not getting through, factories having to close, it's significant.
With planes grounded, the post office and other express carriers have been loading most of their shipments on trucks.
And then when you get at the southern end of St. Louis, you want 44 all the way.
In fact, across the country, Americans have been rediscovering the highways.
Yeah, no problem.
For air travelers in Chicago with other places to go.
Anyone here going to Philadelphia?
Kansas City, Buffalo,
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Long Island, New York. Philly.
The rental agents at Avis became matchmakers of sorts.
Boston or Seattle? Anybody going to? Oh, yeah. You, come with me.
Joe Rudolph suddenly found a traveling companion.
Hi, how you doing?
So you two are going to drive together. You've never met.
Never met. I'm Terry. I'm Joe.
Joe, nice to meet you.
For a 2,000-mile trip to Seattle.
Yeah, we were separated at birth. Okay, is my crew ready here?
And the kindness of a stranger may get Diane Sawicki and her colleagues home.
We know each other, but we're going with another gentleman that we don't know to Cleveland, so we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm going to drop them in Cleveland on the way back to Buffalo.
James Daly has decided this won't be an inconvenience, but an adventure.
I've tried Amtrak, I've tried the Greyhound stations. You can't get through to any of them, so we're going to try the old Great American Way, hitting the road.
One group of travelers launched on a cross-country journey by this tragedy made it to St. Louis today. Sherry, Jeanette, Jerry, Ned, and Doug worked together at a foundation in San Francisco.
Well, we're about a third of the way across the country so far.
They were at a meeting in Washington, D.C. when the terrorists struck and they couldn't fly home.
You know, it felt really good to get out of D.C. Started hitting some countryside, those rolling green hills.
I think part of the reason we got in the van to go was we just couldn't take sitting there and feeling like, you know, we weren't in control in some way of what was happening to us and maybe, you know, to our country as well.
I think it's reassuring. As we drive and look at the scenery, I start thinking about how we've taken our freedom for granted. I mean, something like this happens, and all of a sudden it changes life as we knew it.
To be free enough to do that, to be free enough to get in our own vehicle and to head out, despite all of the tragedy and all of the uncertainty and all of the concerns about security, we're still free enough in this country to do this. Every state we come to, Ned knows the state song.
So what is the state song for Illinois?
1818 saw your founding, Illinois. I won't do it.
But
At other times, people might have complained about being thrown together to drive across the country, but the enormity of the tragedy in New York has put most everything else into a new perspective. Dan?
Thanks a lot, Blackstone. After the horrific events this week in New York City's financial district, Wall Street faces a long road back. On that subject, Richard Schlesinger.
They were the signature peaks of the New York skyline, symbols of the city's wealth and power. And now they are missing.
The Twin Trade Towers are gone.
The world's most famous skyline has changed.
See if you can find him, because I don't know where he is, though.
In the rubble, thousands of lives are likely lost. Many more have been displaced. There were about 400,000 people working in New York's financial district, enough to fill a good-sized city. Now the area looks like a war zone, and many of those workplaces are gone. Jack Williams' 300-person law firm used to occupy 3 floors of the North Tower.
The first priority was accounting for our people.
Remarkably, he found out everyone was okay.
Thank you. I almost cried. It was a very emotional moment for me, and I announced it to the firm, and there was obviously a cheer went up.
Now it's time to worry about their livelihoods.
The second thing we did, was we also had a team to go look for real estate.
Today, he found a place to relocate, at least temporarily, uptown, away from the destruction. It is a new beginning.
It's going to be very difficult to reconstruct 150 years of history and get started once again.
The grief of this event cannot be measured, but the costs are beginning to be calculated.
I think what happened on Tuesday was beyond the worst-case scenario that anyone ever envisioned.
Robert Hartwig is vice president of the Insurance Information Institute.
We're probably looking at the most expensive insured event in U.S. history.
Before Tuesday, the most costly event was Hurricane Andrew, between $15 and $16 billion. This may cost more.
Given the extensive property loss, the liability issues, the workers' compensation issues, the losses to motor vehicles, aviation losses, at this point we're probably looking at a loss that comes close to that, potentially exceeds it.
And it was no act of nature.
I can't believe I'm hearing myself say that it's from a terrorist event. I thought I might hear myself say it from another strong hurricane that hit Florida or a big earthquake that hit California. But never did I expect to be at the result of the collapse of what really is one of the marquee symbols of New York City.
They were beautiful buildings, absolutely sensational.
New York's former mayor, Ed Koch, himself a symbol of the city, wants to rebuild the Twin Towers for the sake of the skyline and the symbolism.
Demonstrate to terrorists, you'll never have a victory. We will rebuild.
Do you worry about building another target?
Well, but there are so many targets. Isn't the Statue of Liberty a target? Should we take it down and put it in the closet? That's not the way a first-class country operates. We're not going to change our lifestyle because people threaten us.
It's hard to imagine looking at the area today, but Koch could get his wish. If there's a will to rebuild, in this case, there could well be a way.
I think the rebuilding of the financial district and the World Trade Center area specifically is feasible, and not only feasible, will happen most certainly.
And he says the insurance companies are prepared.
We will be able to rebuild New York. We're talking about a Marshall Plan for Manhattan.
A Marshall Plan?
A Marshall Plan.
Like the plan to rebuild Europe after World War II?
That's right. We'll be rebuilding Manhattan.
By any measure, it would be a mammoth undertaking. It will take years to accomplish. But New Yorkers, like attorney Jack Williams, are willing to wait.
We're all determined to make it go, and whatever it takes, I'm willing to do.
There is still so much work to be done tonight in this city, the wrenching work of finding the victims and cleaning up the financial district. But it's easy and it's tempting in a way to see the rebuilding of the Twin Towers as a metaphor for this city, rising from the rubble. Dan?
Richard Schlesinger, live tonight here in New York City. Not a news bulletin, but a news alert. Dateline Tokyo. The United States and Philippine authorities have raided a hotel in Manila in connection with the U.S. terror attacks. The source of this is the Philippine president, that the authorities have raided this hotel in Manila. More details may be forthcoming as the evening rolls along. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has named wealthy Saudi exile Osama bin Laden as, quote, a prime suspect in this week's attacks. For perspective on the question of what to do about that, we go to Mark Phillips in our London bureau.
Little by little, in symbol and in fact, the groundwork for the retaliation for Tuesday's attacks is being laid. Today's changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace, with its unprecedented playing of the Star-Spangled Banner, was the symbolic expression of the international effort that is being discussed. Just as the laying of flowers at the U.S. Embassy in London is an expression of the sentiment that the U.S. does not stand alone. But while there is a will to retaliate internationally, a way must still be found.
It's a war.
Here, too, there may be calls for quick and decisive action.
There is a need for an immediate kind of blow that they should get in few weeks.
But in Europe and elsewhere, the form of any potential American-led retaliation is far from agreed. While everyone is pointing toward Islamic extremist elements, particularly those associated with the Afghanistan-based Osama bin Laden, the argument is over whether striking out would reduce the terrorist threat or make it worse.
I think it's a very bad idea, very unwise, and everything we know about previous retaliatory acts suggests that they are often ineffective and usually inappropriate.
Beyond the question of establishing a provable link between bin Laden and the attacks is the equally difficult problem of finding him. All of the latest satellite and listening surveillance technology has been unable to pin him down. And the last attempt to use cruise missiles to target him after the car bomb attacks on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania was singularly unsuccessful. And Abdul Bari Atwan knows why. When he was allowed a rare interview with bin Laden 3 years ago, it took place in a remote mountain cave in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden knows how not to be seen.
And if there is a highly advanced network of communications, it will be his assistants and his aides who are really doing this. But himself, Osama bin Laden, never touched a satellite phone. He never used any electronic equipment because he knows that he will be detected, and he knows that the American device system is all over Afghanistan trying to spot him.
And even if bin Laden could be targeted, what would eliminating him accomplish? Not necessarily much, says Simon Reeve, who has written on the new breed of terrorists that bin Laden represents. He calls them the new jackals. Even if he could be located, targeted, and eliminated, what would that result in? What would that solve?
Well, I think that could be very dangerous, because I think it would inspire more of his followers to commit extreme actions.
Whatever retaliatory approach is decided on against whatever target, the general consensus is it will take more than air power to get at it. General Sir Michael Rose commanded NATO forces in Bosnia.
If you just go for the military solution delivered from the belly of an aircraft, you're never going to win. You're just going to add armies to the people who are already supporting these terrorists.
Boom! And others wonder if, even after the scale and treachery of this week's attacks, Americans have the stomach for a protracted campaign.
Maybe the American public will stomach 200, 300, maybe 1,000 casualties simply because they are now affected by what happened on the World Trade Center and in New York. But after that, I believe, it could be a civil war. It could be, a war of attrition against these American troops. Taliban will join. I'm not surprised if other Islamic countries will join. I mean, Islamic people, Pakistani people, they may join this war.
Resisting an
American. Oh, yes, resisting American.
As the scale of the terrorism as a result of the New York and Washington attacks has risen so dramatically, so have the options and really the risks in combating it. This has been called a war, and it may well involve the sacrifices of war, Dan.
Mark Phillips. Mark, before we let you go, it's not widely known or thought about in this country, But the Muslim populations in France, Germany, and a number of European countries, they've risen dramatically in recent years. Is there not concern that any or all of these countries could suffer some kind of terrorist attack? And Osama bin Laden, is a belief that he has operatives in all of those countries?
Well, there's a double jeopardy really involved here. Yes, there is a large and expanding Muslim population, particularly, as you say, in France and in southern Europe, coming from North Africa primarily, and there have been comments right through the day about the extent of the bin Laden network extending into perhaps more than 50 countries in the world to a greater or lesser extent. But the second aspect of that as well is with the support that has been expressed in Europe through NATO and in direct one-to-one conversations between European leaders and the Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Bush, the association of the Europeans and NATO with the American cause, the support that has been expressed, really increases the vulnerability here as well. And people are taking that extremely seriously, as security right across Europe has been tightened on the air and on the ground. This is very much an international battle that's being formed up, and all the risks are now being shared.
Mark Phillips in London, thanks. Osama bin Laden has long found refuge in Afghanistan. You can look at the map, and bordering Afghanistan in the south is Pakistan. To the east, it has a small border with China. Afghanistan borders on the west. It has a long border with Iran. To the north, a border with what used to be part of the Soviet Union, now Turkestan, but the Soviet Union not far off its border. And the center of gravity is shifting in the story somewhat to this area of the world, with the belief that when and if the United States strikes, Afghanistan is a highly possible, if not probable, target. Now, Afghanistan's rulers, the Taliban, they're bracing for a U.S. military response that seems to them all but inevitable. Alan Pizzey joins us tonight from Islamabad, Pakistan. Alan?
Good morning, Dan. Pakistanis woke up this morning here with the news that their country is going to be the ground zero of any kind of retaliation against the Taliban, because General Musharraf, the leader of this country, has given the United States unequivocal assurances that he will cooperate totally in any effort. And we believe that certainly includes the use of Pakistani airspace. It may also include the use of Pakistani ground bases, and therein lies a serious problem for Pakistan. One of the pieces in one of the papers this morning said that the GHQ, which is roughly the equivalent of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I suppose, here in Pakistan, is holding emergency meetings because they have to do two things. One, they have to figure out how they can help the Americans best. They also have to figure out what response they might get from their own people. There is a core of Islamic fundamentalism here, and that's quite close to the surface. And they are worried, of course, that if they do too much, allow their bases to be used too much against Osama bin Laden, that there could be a groundswell of public opinion against them. But Pakistan has made itself fully available, they say, to the Americans. They will do whatever is necessary. And because, as you mentioned, they are the closest friendly country to the U.S., to Afghanistan, they are definitely the place where it's all going to be happening from. And they have a lot to offer, Dan.
Alan Pizzey in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan in the northern part of the country. Joining us now, Fuad Ajami, distinguished professor at Johns Hopkins University, expert on the Middle East and international affairs, and a CBS News consultant. Fuad, one question that's been nagging at me. We keep saying, and it's true, Osama bin Laden has tremendous personal wealth, but he's got to keep that money somewhere. Who launders his money? Where does the money trail lead?
Wouldn't we love to know? Because we've been talking about this. I mean, this man inherited quite a large sum of money from his father. The irony of it, as bin Laden tries to overthrow the House of Saud, and as bin Laden talks radicalism, and as bin Laden poses as this later-day Che Guevara of the Islamic world and plays rebel, he was the heir to a huge fortune. And one of the things that I think our intelligence will need to break, where does this man keep his money? Surely it can't be in a pillow, and surely it can't be in the Afghanistan Central Bank. Obviously, this money has to be available to him. This is the money he uses to recruit these young people who revere him. And it's that piece of the puzzle we need to get at.
would I be wrong in believing that perhaps some big international banks somewhere are laundering some of that money?
Somebody will be giving this man his money because, again, I repeat, this money is not in Pakistan and it surely is not in Afghanistan. He may have some small change for the Taliban to keep him around. So
you mean buried in a can out there?
Absolutely, so he can hang around the streets of the streets of Kabul and the hills of Afghanistan, but the money is somewhere else.
It's probably in a Swiss bank somewhere.
Or Singapore, Malaysia. There may be places where, again, bin Laden can play.
Let me ask you, with the subject of suicide bombers.
Sure.
What does the Quran say about this? What does Islamic tradition say about suicide?
That's a fundamental question. I mean, I think I could pass a PhD exam or fail one on that one, Ed. But that's the heart of it. And there's a debate within the world of Islam, occasioned by these suicide martyrs today. And there are jurists who have been issuing fatwas, and we know the term fatwa from Ayatollah Khomeini's judgment on Salman Rushdie. That's a ruling opinion. There are people who've come forth with fatwas saying, hey, suicide martyrdom is a form of murder. You're killing yourself, which is banned by Islamic doctrine. So a high mufti, a high religious authority in Saudi Arabia, ruled that all suicide martyrdom is impermissible. But meanwhile, you have someone like Osama bin Laden, who's not a religiously learned man, but actually a troublemaker who has radicalized the tradition and set it ablaze. So who speaks for Islam? Is it the conservative jurists, or is it, again, freelancers and preachers like Osama bin Laden and his types? And the debate on this one is very open. It's not settled.
We're getting cramped for time, Fufuar Jami, but you described Osama bin Laden as a kind of Che Guevara of Islam. There was that time in the 1960s when Che Guevara was seen as perhaps one of, if not the principal threats to freedom and democracy.
Yes, of course. And this is the threat that stalks us today, is this man with a lot of money. He's got $300-400 million to blow. He's got this religious animus against the West, and he bears this animus for being in Arabia. It's really the blowback of the Gulf War. This is what Osama bin Laden is all about. We went to Arabia, and he wishes to drive us out of Arabia.
Fuad Ajami, thanks. In the past few days, against a backdrop of horror, the nation, indeed the world, have been witness to the courage and heroism, the nobility, if you will, of rank-and-file workaday Americans.
We have gathered here today as communities of faith to unite our prayers, our hopes, our support, to express our grief, to remember all the victims of these attacks, and to pray for the ongoing rescue efforts. May our unity in heart and prayer be a beacon of light in a darkened world.
Oh, beautiful, oh, spacious skies, for amber waves of rain, for purple mountains, majesties above the rooted plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
If there was any doubt about the kind of conflict, the kind of war we're now engaged in, it was eliminated when President Bush said today, this is the first war of the 21st century, adding, and I quote, "We will lead the world to victory." The landscape has been changed literally and psychologically. The terror that arrived on U.S. soil is no less than an attack on the American way of life and the freedom so fundamental to our democracy and to freedom-loving people around the world. We know evil when we see it. But rooting out this particular evil will likely be a marathon, not a sprint. Normal may well be redefined. Leading the world to victory, as the President has promised, will be a stern test for those who govern and a test of will for all of us. to go forward amid the sorrow. But Americans have faced and passed such tests before with flying colors by standing tall for freedom and especially by standing together. Stay tuned to this CBS station for more continuing coverage of the attack on America.